Hi, I'm Vince Molinari, and welcome to the Nest Summit, part of Climate Week New York City. I am thrilled to have my dear friend Amir Dossal here with us today, founder and president of Global Partnership Forum. Amir, welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much, Vince. I'm honored to be here with you. It's exciting, and you're doing amazing work to promote the UN's agenda. So really great.
So kind, especially coming from you. I'm just trying to emulate and catch up with you. I've got to run through a few pieces of your background here, Amir, because it's just astounding, and we could do our whole talk and interview just going through your background. So I'm going to just go through a couple of them. Well, for me, first and foremost, I am thrilled that you are co-founder of the Blockchain Commission for Sustainable Development, that I know well, and co-founding that with you, with our dear friend Sergio Fernandez de Corva, back in 2017 at the SDG Media Zone during UNGA. So we go from that, we go to your role as a commissioner for the Broadband Commission for Digital Development, to your co-founding of the Ocean Sanctuary Alliance. And it really all culminates about everything that you do, and what I've learned so much from you about is partnerships. And you're a veteran of 25 years of the United Nations, last stop as the executive director for, most appropriately, the Office of Partnerships. So couldn't think of a better person to come on, talk to us about collaboration, talk about partnerships, weave that into our whole storyboard around Climate Week. So we could jump in anywhere, but I'd love you to tell us a bit about your work at the Ocean Sanctuary Alliance and tying that all into our wonderful Climate Week, New York City.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I have to say to you that the issue of oceans and climate was not so high on the agenda in the MDGs. When we were putting together the Sustainable Development Goals, it became clear that the UN wanted to do something in terms of climate, in terms of ocean, in a much stronger and bigger way. Climate has been on the agenda for the UN for 25 plus years. Ocean was never featured in the MDGs. So we pushed for it, and way back in 2015, when we got that in place, for example, we were thrilled. It was clear that ocean, which represent 2/3 of the Earth, ocean is our livelihood. We get 90% of our food delivered through the ocean, waters, and lakes and seas, for example. And it is also clear that the oceans are being polluted badly, and we run the risk of losing our biodiversity, the whole richness of fish from the seas. So we focused on one aspect of it, which is to help member states, governments around the world, create marine protected areas. The best part was that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals adopted a clear-cut target. It's one of the few targets which focused on achieving them before 2030. And that's 10% of marine protected areas by 2020. Now, that's easily said and done. Many countries have started moving towards that, and quite a few have achieved that, but we are still way behind. According to the UN, we've reached about 5.7% now. We need to get to 10%. Some countries have actually committed a lot more, but they have not implemented this yet. Now, the challenge of implementation is that if you close off part of the sea to fishing, then the fishing community, the coastal community, runs the risk of losing their livelihoods. So it's a balancing act. You need to find replacement income for that, create new aspects of it. Even tourism has to be sensitive tourism, caring tourism, ecotourism, different terminologies one can use, but to make sure that the fish and the mammals and the corals are protected. And the UN has embarked on this. This year was supposed to be the year of the Ocean 2020 conference in Lisbon. Regrettably, because of COVID-19, that didn't happen. But the UN has been active on it and pushing for that, engaging private sector and civil society. And the even better news is that private sector and civil society is stepping up to the plate and saying, we're ready to help. We want to figure out ways of helping governments create these MPAs. So we're getting there. I'm optimistic. I think we should actually have a higher target. We should have a target of 30% instead of 10%. And then once we get that, because there is the coastal communities, but there's also the high seas where people actually not only do the fishing on the high seas, but also deep sea mining, so for rare earths and so on. So I'll stop here and just say to you that progress is being made, but a lot more needs to be done.
So speaking of that, Amir, and I love the way you frame up some of the challenges. There are solutions. There are many pressing issues for our oceans. And again, you point out the difference between deep sea issues and more coastal. What do we need to do from a collaboration standpoint, partnerships, engaging the private sector to not only, I think I love your heightening of the targets to 30%. How do we get to 10% and beyond and solve for some of the other issues facing our oceans?
Right. So I think one of the most important things is we need to figure out the answer to the question, what's in it for me? The private sector will not come in just for the sake of doing good. They need to see the value proposition. And it's not difficult if you establish these innovative public-private partnerships where the private sector can invest in the coastal community in an environmentally friendly way, create jobs, but also make money out of it. They have to think of the bottom line, but they can do that and do good in the process. So private sector coming in alone and saying, this is what we'll do, is not enough. You need to work with the community at large, and the governments. The governments can provide that enabling environment for business to flourish, provide them that kind of right regulations and business-friendly rules and regulations. And the coastal communities can then benefit from it, from new capital. And it's starting to happen, but not enough. So in answer to your question, we need to open up the doors. We do not want to be in a silo. COVID-19 has caused us to be a lot more inward-looking. I think we need to have that global view that the Earth is indeed a village, and that what happens in a different part of the world impacts us. What happens in Greenland impacts us in climate. You saw what's happened with the ice break. Sooner rather than later, it'll affect us here in the East Coast and the West Coast and so on.
I'd love you to go into that a little bit further, Amir, because that was really kind of, as we look at this movement, this engagement of private sector, all that's happening, and now we have the backdrop of COVID globally. And as you said, it's forced so many nations to pull inward and be a little bit more isolated or nationalistic. How do we break down those silos? How do we create that collaboration? Really, and I love the way you framed it, by the way. Our planet is a village, right? The oneness of each of us and the connectivity from the Amazon to the Nordics and to our oceans, and the impact that each of us has on all of those elements, and that has on us. So how do we work in this COVID environment? I know you're giving that a lot of thought.
Yes, it's not easy, by the way. The UN's focus is multilateralism, engaging all the member states. And incidentally, nationalism at the political level does not necessarily translate into the local level. There are philanthropists, there are social entrepreneurs out there who are thinking beyond their borders. They realize that climate does not know any borders. What happens in India impacts us here at some point in time. What happens in Africa, Latin America, impacts us in North America. So the idea is that we should figure out the value proposition. Multilateral financial institutions, international financial institutions, have only so much funding. They cannot, on their own, achieve some of these goals, some of the challenges facing the world. Some have started to argue that, okay, We stopped using cars, so there's less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So climate is not top of the agenda. Well, the Secretary General has said, not true. While on the one hand, CO2 emissions have reduced because of less traffic on the road, less air travel, but industrialization will continue to do so. And by the way, industrialization has to take place around the world if we are to address the huge gaps in our society. When we have 30% of the population living below the poverty line of $1.25 a day. So the UN and Secretary General Gutierrez has launched a COVID-19 fund, not only to help with health and education, but also poverty alleviation. And I think that's where member states can come in. That's where private sector can come in. And we've been very pleasantly surprised with the WHO fund to address COVID-19. People like Bill Gates and others are contributing to it, to find a cure, find a vaccine, and help humanity in general. It's human nature. We tend to think of ourselves first, but very quickly we should be thinking of others too.
Well, and I think that's the perfect way to close out. And I'd love to get your closing thoughts. As you reference Secretary General Gutierrez, all of the you speak of speaks to the theme of his decade of action. So, Amir, give me your closing thoughts. What should we take away from this? How do we all move to action for the benefit of our planet?
So I think, Vince, what you're doing, for example, your platform is so much needed. Because the UN can only say things about itself to a certain extent. UN cannot be an advocate for its own work. So the UN needs people like yourself to be the voice for them, to promote what is needed, to highlight and engage public-private sectors, to engage entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and touch the hearts and minds of people around the world to say, you should join the party. You should be part of that solution. And the way you can be part of the solution is not necessarily to say, I must come together in a central kitty. I can contribute in my own small way, in my own community, my own village, my own city, and social organization, and so on. Each one, whatever little bit you do, will make a difference.
Well, I love that picture of the small parts aggregating to something so powerful and being able to exponentiate. Amir, it's always a delight. I am thrilled to count you as a friend. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.